share the screen. Okay, so we were looking at Rav Blow's Sefer, the Pischei Choshen, which is sort of like the masterwork on Choshen Mishpat that so many of the other poskim refer to. Rav Bloy was, was alive in our, just maybe he passed away, 20 years ago or something. But he was a master mechaber of Sfarim. Let me just get our place here. And for some reason, here we are. There we go. So we were in the middle of this piece, and we're going to finish it today. So we were talking about this big machlokes that we have between the Maharik and other Rishonim regarding the ability to use secular authorities to prevent a neighbor from either moving into your neighborhood, even when the halacha could not prevent you from doing so because his nuisance activity does not rise to the level of where the halacha would say that, okay, we can stop him. But you could use the ordinances of the secular authorities to prevent him from doing that. So then the last thing that we saw, I believe, yesterday was V'ra'iti b'shut avnei nezer b'din mishi yesh lo beis hakneses v'ratza echad livnos od beis hakneses. There's a shul already in the area, and a guy decides he's going to build a new shul. The halach harishon u'masar l'shilton shelo yitnu lu rishayon. And so the guy who owns the first shul, I guess in those days, every yid owns his own the shtibel. So he goes and he tells the authorities, don't give this guy a license to open up a shul. And the Avnei Nezer said that, and Rav Bloy's contention was, the Avnei Nezer only permitted it because it was already after the fact. That once the guy had already done it, v'dan shami mikri moser o aser shelo kedin. And he said, did the guy behave correctly or not? U'medivrei harasha heveis le'el dekarle hashavas aveda mashma sheyesh lo din mamon u'lefi zeh gam manias rebech havi kehefsid mamon b'tzarchiyim. So he says it's really not so clear because it could be based on what we've seen above that if I am preventing someone from doing an activity, I'm causing them potentially a loss of money. So is that considered to be acceptable or not? The Avnei Nezer felt that once it had already been done, there's not much you can do about it. V'nira od shalachar shezeh kvar asa v'al yedei peniya l'shilton yagia lo nezek yoser mimat shechayev. It could also be that because it was already after the fact, and by going to the authorities, this fellow who wants to open up the second shul is going to get more damage, shall we say, or more harm than what would be coming to him according to halacha. Vaday asur lo lasos din la'atzmo. So then certainly you cannot take the law into your own hands. Uchmoshe kasafti b'perek dalid ve'al kein min haroi shekol harotza. Oh, that was just you on the phone.
I know it's going to be late, so
Min haroi shekol harotza lasos davar ha'olu la'orer hisnagdus mitzad hashchenim and b'tzedek o shelo b'tzedek yodia lahem v'yispar hadavar al pi divrei Torah. And therefore, it seems that so therefore, you cannot take the law into your own hands if the harm, the injury that's going to occur to this neighbor is going to be of a higher level than what halacha would dole out to him. So, for example, if by telling the government authorities this guy's going to get slapped with fines and penalties and perhaps even imprisonment because of something that he's doing that the halacha would not object to, so then that's truly going to be usher. The alkein min haroi, and therefore the probably the best policy would be shekol harot salasos davar ha'olu la'or hitnagdut mitzad hashchenim, that anyone who wants to do something that's going to create potentially an objection among the neighbors in b'tzedek or shelo b'tzedek, whether rightfully or wrongfully, yodia lahem, v'yitbayer hadavar al pi divrei Torah. You should first, the menschlich thing to do to avoid this kind of gray situation is notify the neighbors in advance. Chevra, I want you to know I'm starting up a small Talmud Torah in my apartment. I'm going to be tutoring children, but I want to reassure you, I'm not going to be having more than 3 children at any given time in my apartment. And furthermore, you should know that the halacha entitles me to do so. If you have any concerns, please contact me. Or at the very minimum, you should consult with a posek to find out, is it permissible for me to start this activity in my living space? And therefore, by doing that, you'll distance from yourself and from others excessive losses. He says, so up until now, we've only talked about preventing someone from performing activity in your neighborhood. But let's say your friend wants to do a construction project and he needs a license. He needs to get a permit to be able to do the building. And in order to be able to get his building permit, he needs the neighbors to sign off on it. This is a very common situation where, let's say, I want to add on to my property, but it creates an obstruction, let's say, to my neighbor. So my neighbor will have to, the municipality might require the neighbors who are affected by this construction to sign off. So there's room to think about, do the neighbors have an obligation to sign off to let their fellow Yid do his construction project? Let's say his project is such that according to Torah law, he's well within his rights to build this addition to his property. But some of the neighbors are disturbed by the fact that, well, we don't like the idea that all of our homes are uniform in size and in appearance, and now he's going to be building out. It's going to change the uniformity of the community. The halacha couldn't care less about something like that. Okay.
Aesthetics.
Well, sometimes aesthetics do make a difference, right? If a person's blocking my view of something beautiful, so then I can stop him according to halacha. But let's say it's an aesthetic that the halacha does not contend with.
If he changed the color of his brick.
Or the door.
Yeah.
When the Bible talks about
the house brick, and then he does.
He wants to change it, right? Now, I don't think that I don't know. Do you need a building permit for that? I'm not sure if you would. But let's say it's something that you need a building permit for, and some of the neighbors don't want to sign. But the halacha has no objection to this neighbor doing that. Okay, so he says, even though halachically there's no objection to him doing this building project, so in that situation, here the neighbor is not proactively going to the authorities to go against the guy. The question here is, what if he remains passive and he just says, I'm not signing?
Yeah.
And by his not signing, the government won't grant him the building permit. So could you argue that he's less at fault, even according to, those who say that you're not allowed to go to the authorities to stop him from doing something that halacha permits him to do? Here, it's the opposite case, where by not signing, the net result is the same, that I'm preventing him, but at least I haven't done anything proactive. So, and by doing this, I'm either causing my neighbor some sense of loss, or at least a lack of ability to increase his benefits. L'anias da'iti nira l'damos din ze l'ma shadanu haposkim be'inyan Yerushat Habat. So it would seem to me that we could compare this to a question that the poskim discuss regarding a daughter's inheritance. Kishetzrichem hayorshim lekabel mimena ksav vitur kidei sheyuchlu lizchot birusha hamagia lahem im chayevet lachto. So let's say I'm not sure exactly of the case, but let's say the testator made a special condition in his will that in order for the other heirs to receive their portion, the daughter has to sign off granting permission for them to receive their portion. And the question is, does she have to sign that paper? L'chavardanu harbe poskim bazeh, v'das harbe she'in kofin osa, ve'al kol panim yecholo lidrosh pitzui avor chatimata. And according to many poskim, she's not obligated to sign, or she can ask them for some kind of compensation before she signs. You could argue the same thing in our situation as well. Let's say this guy needs 100% consent from the neighbors. And one of the neighbors says, sorry, I'm too busy. I'm not interested. And then the guy gets the hint that he's got to slip him a $100 bill in order for him to sign. He's well within his rights to say, I'm not going to sign. Okay, but if the guy's willing to pay, then it would seem that you do have to cooperate and sign. He says, and it could be that if there's no inconvenience to you whatsoever, and you just want to make a buck, it could be that you're not allowed to. It could be that you'd be obligated to sign without any compensation at all. And since each situation is unique, the posek should use his discretion in a situation like this. So essentially, my son is in the real commercial real estate world. So he tells me that, when he and his partner purchase a building, so they, in order for them to rehab the building and do new subdivisions and whatever construction they want to do, and in order to make the building more profitable, they have to get rid of all the tenants. And in Los Angeles, the laws are, very, very much in favor of the tenants' rights, as they are like like someone just was telling me last night, if you own real estate in New York, you're really in trouble with the new mayor, Yamach Shamo. Yeah. And it's like that in many places in LA also. So what they usually end up having to do is they have to buy out certain tenants. You pay them off to get rid of them. So in that kind of situation where you're being asked to move, you certainly have a right to demand compensation. But there are many situations where the neighbors surrounding might be asked to consent to this construction project. There, like let's say a person has a unit that is a fourplex, and he wants to turn it into a fiveplex because he's going to take some of the one of the parking spots and help convert it into an apartment, which is now what a lot of people are doing in California. That now that California at one point was having a housing crisis, so they allowed people to take parking garages and turn them into living space. So, but it could be that you would need let's say the municipality says you need the consent of the neighbors. Mm-hmm. So on the one hand, there's no halacha in Shulchan Aruch that you can point to that would say this guy's causing you damage. On the other hand, there is some level of inconvenience because now you're going to have more people parking on your street. So, but is more people parking on your street really called an inconvenience that the halacha would recognize? Doubtful. So based on that, it sort of gets into this area that we're talking about. Certainly, to get rid of a tenant, you'd have to, it's perfectly correct and appropriate for a tenant to say, if you want to evict me, buy me out, right? And a lot of, almost all the time, it's you can buy out a tenant. It's just a question of at what price. Everyone's got a Everyone's got their price. Some people you can get rid of for a few hundred, some people a few thousand, some people five figures. Okay. But eventually everybody gets out. Um, but but with this, let's say a neighbor says, well, I don't want the inconvenience of extra people parking on the street. You're bringing one more tenant into the neighborhood and you're taking away one parking space. But you tell the guy, yeah, but look, during the day and even the evening, there's ample parking. Yeah, but I don't want to have to walk down the block. Okay. So that's an inconvenience, but it's not an inconvenience that the halacha would necessarily acknowledge. And so that's where you get into this situation. Do I have to sign your consent that you're asking me to sign or not? So there too, a neighbor might say, but it's a gray area. And there it would really require, let's say it's two from Yids. So they should go to a Rav and they should discuss it with him and then find out, like, are you really inconvenienced or are you just trying to capitalize on this guy's need for your consent?
Rabbi, when the first Mordechai, so if you look at the issues that would have been there, so it's not, there's nothing really halachically a neighbor could say against having the shul there, really, right? Because it's not really, it was just more about maybe parking, more people on the street. It's a high-end area with very expensive homes. They don't want to have a sort of an image of too much traffic and other things going on.
I think that there, a person could maybe potentially make a case of more foot traffic, more noise pollution. And both of those are recognized in halacha as being legitimate concerns that you can block someone from doing activity. But remember, as we saw, the one exception where you can't stop a person is if he's opening up a school or a shul.
What happens if, is there value that the private values will go down? Is that a good excuse?
I think so. I think you could say you're causing me financial loss. But
It's hard to prove.
it's hard to prove, and it's also causative. So I'm not sure if that would be enough grounds to stop a person. Eventually at the end of the day, once you wade through all of these, neighbors have to learn how to work together within reason.
The people who have homes that are worth $5-7 million are sensitive to the character of the area.
Yes, yeah. And that sort of is a lesson unto itself, right? Don't get so attached to the aesthetics of your neighborhood that you go well beyond what the halacha permits you to do. Just because a person's sensitive, to the value and to the aesthetics of the neighborhood doesn't automatically give them a right to be, what's the word, be so pedantic and to come down so hard against people. It's like
There's a word for it, and not in my backyard.
NIMBY. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not in my backyard.
You can't complain if the neighbor doesn't cut the grass, doesn't take the garbage in.
Well, it starts smelling if it.
Are you allowed to complain? I mean, it depends to whom you're complaining. If you're going to report him to the authorities without first talking to him, and he's a frum yid, even not a frum yid, menschlichkeit requires you. First of all, you could be making a chilul Hashem if you're out there wearing a yarmulke and you call on the municipality on your neighbor, and your neighbor finds out about it. I think that's a chilul Hashem. But again, it depends what he's doing. If he's simply not cutting the grass to your liking, that's one thing. What if he's running a drug den or
Yes,
something
it's
like
growing
that?
grass.
Yeah, right. So again, every situation has to be taken on a case by case. All right, so let's go back to the Ohole Yaakov.
I presume if you're entitled to um, financial compensation or whatever to sign, you have to be reasonable about it as well, right? You said that everyone has a price, but I mean, you can't extort a price beyond.
Right, right. And that also should be something that um, that also should be something that is done with in consultation with a third party.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so that was the last halacha that we saw, and that's what brought us. The last halacha that we saw had to do with a person who's doing work on his property, and there's a lot of dust and a lot of schmutz that flies up as a result. A person has to distance that so that it doesn't reach his neighbor's property. Person who makes fire on his property and creates smoke, and that also you have to distance that from your neighbor. Unless and if any activity that's going to cause damage to your neighbor, you have to get his consent before you engage in it. And that's where what led us to look at the footnote, and the footnote referred us to Rav Blau's Sefer. Okay, so looking at the next halacha, Mi sherotzeh laharchiv et dirato. If a person wants to expand his apartment or his living space, kagon she'eno mazik lishchenav, he's not in any way causing damage to his neighbors through hezek re'iyah. So, for example, his expansion is not going to block his neighbor's view. But nonetheless, the municipality requires him to get signatures. But he has to get a license, he has to get signatures in order to be able to get a permit from the authority. And the neighbor is even willing to pay the neighbors if they were willing to sign. It would seem that if he's willing to pay a reasonable amount in order to get you to sign, then you would be obligated to sign according to halacha, so that the neighbor can get what is he's entitled to according to halacha. There's no reason that you have, no legitimate reason that you have to prevent him from doing his expansion other than either jealousy or spite. So why wouldn't you? ואפשר שבמקום שאין נזק לשכן כלל וכלל, ייתכן שכופן על מידת סדום, וצריך לחתום ללא תמורה, והכל לפי ראות עיני המורה. So here he's quoting directly from Rav Blau that we just saw. It could be that when there's no damage at all, this particular neighbor has no skin in the game. There's no reason for him not to sign. So then we even compel him to sign. The Beis Din can compel the guy to sign if he's a frum neighbor, because that's what's called midas sedom. What does midas sedom mean? There's no legitimate reason why you're not willing to sign. Why wouldn't you sign? You're not losing anything, and therefore v'hakol lefi ra'ot einei hamoreh. Everything therefore would go according to the eyes of the posek. Then that brings us to the next halacha. Tzarich laharchik mikotel chaveiro davar ha'olu ligrom nezek lekotel. You have to distance, let's say, you want to do activity on your property, but it's right near the dividing wall between your land and your neighbor's land. And this activity could potentially damage the wall. Okay, kagon dvarim ma'alim hevel. So the cases that are brought by the Gemara are situations where you're doing work that could actually create additional heat. And that heat could go in gefes, v'zevel, melach, v'sid, v'chol kayotze bazeh. Let's say you have like a compost that you're working with, a compost heap. Compost heaps produce heat. Anyone, you ever work with compost? Okay, the whole principle of a compost heap is that you take certain organic garbage. You leave it, you turn it over every few days, and you allow it to deteriorate, and it creates heat in that process. There's some kind of chemical reaction that causes heat. So you're using different materials that heat up when they start to break down. May raglayim. Let's say you're using, you're gay patient. You have an outhouse right by your neighbor's wall, and so the human waste sometimes goes up against your neighbor's wall, and it has a caustic effect. Uric acid can be can have a pretty bad effect. Not just the smell, but could also actually break down the wall over time. Vafila, because of this would be true even on a wall made out of stone. But even stone wall can actually start to deteriorate. Maybe the mortar and the foundation can start to deteriorate if it's constantly exposed to urine or some other caustic material. And similarly, if you expose your neighbor's wall to moisture that it normally would not be exposed to, that also could be a reason to coerce your neighbor to distance his activity from that wall. David V, have you ever had experience with this particular situation where you've seen materials break down over time because of activity that is done near that material, like a wall starts to disintegrate and stuff like that?
I'm trying to think of an example. You say like I would be building something and there is some deterioration. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm asking, like, has anyone ever asked you to come in and to repair or to redo a part of their property due to some kind of rotting away that is the product of activity? Like there's mold, we know that, and there's rot that can develop in certain materials. Certainly, exposure to soil can cause rapid deterioration of certain materials.
So, yeah. I haven't had neighbors complaining about that kind of stuff. I mean, sometimes you might have some debris that maybe would have blown over that, I'm usually cognizant about, but nothing of like deterioration of materials like that I haven't.
I had a situation where I think this may qualify that I had my backyard was lower than the backyard behind me, and the backyard behind me they had a pool, and so the chlorinated water would spill over the pool and would come down into my backyard and kill all the
plants.
Kill all the trees. It was so. I think
Wow.
that's the same type of thing,
So,
right?
so did you take action against your neighbor? What was the resolution?
I moved to Israel.
Baruch Hashem.
No, I
Okay.
mean, I had to replace. I didn't create a problem over it. I had to replace the trees, and I just replaced them. But I knew it was because of the pool. Like everything was destroyed around the fence.
Well, you're a nice guy. You could have taken them to Beis Din. Okay, have a good Shabbos, everyone. Shabbat
Shabbat
shalom.
shalom.
So we're off next week, and we'll see you Bezrat Hashem a week from Monday.